Most shipwrecks leave something behind, a name carved on a memorial, a marked grave, or at least a dot on a nautical chart. But some ships vanish so completely that history itself forgets they ever existed. This is the story of Adgillus, a vessel erased by time, remembered only because of a single, forgotten plate found more than a century after she disappeared. Beneath the cold, restless waters of the Irish Sea, the wreck of Adgillus rests in silence. There's no memorial here, no warning buoy floating on the surface, no official marker to tell you what lies below. Just broken wood, scattered iron, and questions that took generations to answer. To understand how a ship could be so thoroughly lost, we have to go back to her beginning. Adgillus was born in 1873 in a small shipyard along the St. Lawrence River in Quebec, Canada. She was a beautiful wooden sailing vessel, a bark, handcrafted during the final, romantic age of sail. This was a time of transition, when the first puffs of steam from new iron ships were beginning to signal the end of wind-powered trade. Her builders, skilled artisans, working with hand tools, likely never imagined that the name they so carefully painted on her hull would disappear from shipping records within a single year. Constructed from sturdy Canadian pine and oak, Adgillus was built for the harsh realities of long Atlantic crossings. Her purpose was humble but essential: to carry cargo. Her holds were filled with everyday goods, crates of plates, barrels of tools, and household items destined for bustling European ports. Her life was meant to be ordinary, a series of predictable voyages from one continent to another. But the sea, as it often does, had other plans. In the late autumn of 1874, Adgillus departed from Quebec on what would become her final voyage. The familiar rhythm of wind and waves, a constant companion. But as she neared her destination, the weather began to turn. Historical weather reports from that time describe a rapidly forming storm system, moving across the North Atlantic, a storm of unusual violence, even by the notoriously fierce standards of the Irish Sea. As Adgillus navigated the treacherous waters between Ireland and Great Britain, the storm struck with sudden, terrifying force. Winds, described later as hurricane force, screamed through her rigging. Massive waves, like liquid mountains, crashed against her wooden hull, each impact a shuddering blow that threatened to tear her apart. The crew, hardened sailors accustomed to rough seas, fought desperately to keep control. They would have been high up in the rigging, trying to reef the sails, their hands raw and frozen, the deck below them slick with icy seawater. Later, survivor accounts not from Adgillus herself, but from other ships caught in the same storm were discovered scattered across obscure maritime reports. They paint a picture of utter chaos. Ships were driven miles off course, their compasses spinning wildly. Cargo broke loose from its lashings, turning the holds into deadly projectiles. Water flooded the lower decks, overwhelming the pumps. Sometime during that terrifying night, under the cover of darkness and raging seas, Adieu's Bunny said. There was no distress signal recorded, no confirmed sinking time. In the chaos of the storm that wrecked dozens of other ships, she was simply gone. In the weeks and months that followed, Adgillus was listed as overdue, presumed lost. But with so many other vessels lost in the same storm, her disappearance barely registered. For decades, maritime historians and record keepers assumed her name was either misreported or that she had been salvaged and renamed. Shipping registers in London and Quebec listed her once, noting her construction, and then never again. Her loss became a historical footnote, a ghost in the archives, not even worth a proper investigation. She was a ship forgotten by the very records designed to remember her. Until one small, unremarkable object changed everything. In the late 20th century, a fisherman was hauling his heavy nets from the depths of the Irish Sea. As the net came aboard, he found something strange tangled in the messier ceramic plate, cracked but surprisingly intact. It was a simple piece of earthenware, the kind you'd find in any 19th century kitchen. But as he cleaned the mud from its underside, he saw a partial stamp, a manufacturer's mark. This small detail, almost lost to time, was the key. The plate didn't belong on the seabed there, not unless it came from a shipwreck, and the manufacturer's mark was traced back to a specific pottery in 19th century Quebec. Suddenly, forgotten Canadian ships lost in the Irish Sea became a subject of intense interest. Researchers dove into dusty, forgotten archives on both sides of the Atlantic. They searched old shipyard records in Canada, looking for vessels built in the 1870s. They scoured insurance logs in Britain, searching for claims filed for lost cargo. They meticulously combed through cargo manifests buried deep in maritime archives, looking for any mention of ceramics from that specific Quebec pottery. Slowly, painstakingly, a picture began to form. The plate was almost certainly cargo, and one name kept appearing in the margins of old documents: Adgillus. With a potential location identified, a team of divers was sent to investigate the suspected wreck site. Descending into the murky, cold water, they found what centuries of sediment had tried to hide. Beneath the sand and silt, they uncovered wooden beams, their shape and joinery consistent with Canadian shipbuilding methods of the 1870 segundos. They found iron fastenings that matched the specific type used during that era. And then, scattered across the seafloor, they found more of the cargo, frozen in time. More plates, tools, and other household goods, all lying exactly where they had settled on that stormy night over a century ago. Adgillus had been found. She had been there all along unseen, unnamed, and ignored by history. The discovery was a triumph of historical detective work, but it was also a somber one. There were no recovered bodies, no personal effects to identify the crew. The final moments of the men who fought to save their ship remain unknown, their stories kept forever by the sea. They have no marked graves. Their families never knew their final resting place. Today, Adgillus remains one of the most obscure shipwrecks ever identified. It's not a site for tourist dives. Its location is protected. There are no grand museum exhibits or commemorative plaques. Its history was reconstructed not from a captain's log or a survivor's tale, but from fragments, a piece of wood, an iron nail, and one forgotten plate that refused to stay lost. The story of Adgillus reminds us that for every famous wreck, like the Titanic, is a single, ordinary object, patiently waiting to be found. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, consider subscribing for more tales from the depths. See you next time.